of looking, thus saith the wise Alondo. When the shadows descend upon the lands, our divine Lord will walk alongside us as equals. So saith the great Alondo. The world shall wander the earth, and such a pestilence will follow in his wake that all who know of his passing shall be struck down by the plague.
Hey everybody, 3 notes at the beginning of the episode really quickly. The first is going to be that if you are watching this on YouTube, you're going to notice some looping footage. Danny's still having some stuff going on with his desktop computer, but that should be fixed by the next time we record, so that shouldn't happen again. If you're listening to the podcast, it doesn't matter to you at all. The second thing is that Chris Hunt is the person who made the theme that you just heard, brand new for Season 6. We didn't say that in the episode, so now I'm telling it to you. You can learn more about his music either down in the description of the YouTube video or in the description of the podcast episode if you're listening to it in that way. Number 3 is that my audio quality in this episode is terrible. I'm not quite sure what was going on. I think that my microphone might not have been plugged in correctly and I wasn't listening to myself talk. So it's a little bit crunchy. That's not really the kind of quality that we are all about these days, but it is what it is. I didn't realize it until literally just now, which is why I'm recording this note. So anyway, that's just 3 things here at the beginning of the thing. If this is your first episode, it normally sounds a little bit better than this. Now, here's the episode. Welcome back to Mages and Murderdads, the best show dedicated to the games beyond Baldur's Gate. This is episode 54, and we're playing Torment, Tides of Numenera. I'm Cameron.
I'm Danny.
Are you, wait, what were you surprised by? Were you surprised by my name? Were you surprised by your own name?
I was surprised by the title of this game that we're playing.
Why is that surprising?
Well, it's not exactly Planescape Torment 2, Tides of Numenera. It's just Torment.
You're right. It's not exactly that.
and by not exactly that, it exactly is not that.
Yes, it exactly is not that. Why are we playing this?
So, I mean, that is a good question, right? Because generally we've stuck with, and I think this is the correct term, like intellectual property / sequels. Like we finish out a game, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
And that's kind of what we did with Baldur's Gate, even though we did it chronologically according to the story, like in fiction chronologically, which led us to do an interesting thing where we played Siege of Dragonspear, a game released in 2017 by a different developer. But we did it because of kind of the narrative cohesiveness. But this game is a little special, though, because Torment Tides of Numenera is not a direct sequel of Planescape Torment.
It is not. It is not that.
Yes.
It is a spiritual sequel?
A spiritual sequel, sure, but one that I think that it is like purposeful that this does not have Planescape in the title.
Correct. It does that because Planescape is the intellectual property of, I guess, was TSR, now Wizards of the Coast. Mm-hmm. Right. It is a setting in the Dungeons and Dragons universe.
Yeah, and this game will not take place in that setting. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, Torment Tides of Numenera is a spiritual sequel that takes, we'll talk about it in just a minute, but it takes some of the concepts and broad ideas from Planescape Torment that we just played, that we played over the last couple months. It takes those things and then puts them in a new universe, but keeps, the bones or like the essence of Torment and does more stuff with it.
Well, you heard it here first. If you were here for the specific pleasures of hearing about 2 people play through the Planescape campaign setting in video game form, well, I hope you have a nice day, because you might as well just get out of here.
yeah, if you really love the idea that you can travel from one plane, from Sigil, the City of Doors, to the Forgotten Realms, guess what? All the realms in this game are remembered. Guess what? No doors.
No doors. Guess what? No having a roach in your pocket to get to the Grey Wastes.
Not even one.
Not even one roach.
Yeah, so this game takes place in the 9th, or in the Monty Cook. So Monty Cook as in, like, the former D&D kind of designer.
Yeah, big 3rd edition guy.
Mm-hmm. He went independent, I guess. And I'm not an expert on this, so feel free, commenters or people in the Discord, to fill in this story as you will. But he goes independent and he starts making all kinds of different stuff, and he made the Numenera universe. Specifically, this is the 9th world setting that this takes place in. And I'll be honest, I mean, I've played this game. I reviewed this game when it came out. Actually, I had to look that up just now to see when that was. January of 2016. I played it back then, but I can't really tell you like what the 9th world is, or like, and I kind of understand like what the difference between like in a given fantasy or science fantasy setting, like what makes Numenera unique. We'll talk about that in a minute, but really, it's just like a convenient substructure to place your video game in, you know?
Yeah, I remember reading a lot about Numenera when it came out because I was really, for a long time, and I guess I still am, I'm interested in kind of the products that people who have been behind D&D editions, whenever they strike out on their own and they like make something, I'm always really interested in the products they end up making, because it's this really interesting thought experiment as far as imagining, okay, well, Monty Cook was a part of that team, and obviously his efforts were kind of moderated and maybe enhanced by the existence of that team, and also by kind of the cultural legacy and kind of inertia behind Dungeons and Dragons as an entity. What happens when you have him and he just gets to do whatever he wants? Yeah. And Numenera is that, in the same way that 13th Age is Rob Heinsoe of 4th edition, and oh gosh, I'm forgetting the. You can obviously tell where my loyalties lie as far as 4th edition.
Wait. It's correct. I'm pretty sure that also worked on that product.
Jonathan Tweet.
Okay,
Jonathan Tweet.
That sounds like an alter ego you would make up on the spur of the moment.
Oh, it's Jonathan Tweet.
Jonathan. Oh shit. Tweet. We zoom in on the Twitter logo. Jonathan Tweet.
Yeah, in the same way that 13th Age is like their brainchild, and you could get an idea of like where it gives you a really interesting insight into like, what was Rob Heinsoe like during the development of 4th edition? Well, he was trying to push it towards 13th Age, most likely. But anyway, Numenera, I know that the reason why it's called the 9th world is that basically it's just Earth, like our Earth, 1 billion years into the future, and that civilizations have waxed and waned 9 times. And that's why it's called the 9th world. That basically there have been 8 apocalypses, and that we are in so a little bit of deep time here.
Yeah. Very Gene Wolfe-y kind of stuff. I was going to mention that later, but that makes a lot of sense, and that legitimately shows up, like the kind of deep time stuff. Shows up kind of immediately in this intro that we're going to talk about. So we can say that before, or we can say that in a bit. But yeah, so it's just this kind of, in the same way that Planescape Torment used the Planescape and then the general D&D-averse to set a story that really didn't have much to do with that. You know what I mean? It's not as if in Planescape Torment, we fight Drizzt Do'Urden and we meet Elminster, and we're like deeply involved in that. We are, a unique character whose story really doesn't intersect with the big movements other than like the Blood War or something like that. So it's in a similar way that happens with that game. Torment Tides of Numenera is just set in the Numenera universe. There might be some like lore stuff that happens, but it is certainly not signaled as that in the game that I can remember. So,
yeah,
similar kind of setup for this game as Planescape.
Any other background you want to give before we kind of jump into our experiences as we start?
Well, so you've never played this before at all, correct?
That's correct, and you have reviewed it.
I did. I played it and reviewed it. It took me... Let me look right here on my thing. It took me 14 hours to play and review it. And since that time it came out, it looks like a free DLC came out. Because I played it like the week it came out. So yeah, it looks like there was some... So there's been some updates is all I'm saying. So even I have not seen all the different things to it. And I only played it in one way. I mean, I think that... Well, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I'm going to try to play it differently this time.
Okay.
In order to kind of get a more robust experience out of it.
And hopefully we have kind of set this up in a way that both of us played in a very different way, because I know that was the intention with Planescape Torment, but in the end, we were both playing very similar characters, hitting very similar console commands.
The console commands makes equals of us all in the end.
It's true. Leviticus 29:17, and woe be unto thee who neglects the console command.
The Lord will striketh thee, and striketh thee, and striketh thee with Control X or whatever. But yeah, so yeah, and we have read it. We'll talk about it in just a second. But we have played. We had a conversation. We have different characters. Ironically enough, they don't have different names because this is a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment. But we'll get there eventually. So tell me about the beginning of this game.
It's pretty wild, and I can already... I don't know, I already get a sense of how different this game feels from maybe games released in the 90s or what have you, but there is this kind of tasteful graphic in the background that gives this impression of like falling, and there's some like noise, like air rushing by, and you get the impression that you are an entity trapped in some kind of membrane. And you get the sense that there are like little hands or some force that's attempting to like peel the membrane off. And you don't remember who you are or why you're in this situation, but you do look down and you see that you have form-fitting clothes on, and that they weren't the clothes you remember having somehow. Interesting line, you remember that your clothing was somehow more ornate before this, so I wonder if that's ever going to pay off. And eventually you are ripped out of whatever membrane you're in, and you're just falling, and you look up, and it's some real evocative of Bloodborne stuff that you see. You see this this moon that appears to have just spat you out.
Yeah, there's I think it's called a collapsing moon.
A collapsing moon, yes.
But yeah, even more than that, like beyond the context of what, or the content of what is happening, I think formally there's a big jump here, right? So in the past, we would have seen this as, or if this were Planescape Torment, we would be watching some kind of either a cutscene, like a straight up cutscene, or we would be seeing like a scripted event, right?
Yes, and I think that's what I was talking about in terms of the jump in time, because imagine what if the very beginning of Planescape, instead of that intro cinematic, it was through this dialogue, right? In some way. And it's a subtle difference, and I think that, I think it would be a little jarring to come straight from the land of cinematics and be like, what the hell? You're just not going to do the cinematic. You're going to do this with text. But I think it really primes the player to feel like they have a sense of agency, even when it's pure exposition, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because it's basically like a choose your own adventure intro.
Yes.
And this game, in the same way that if people have played Pillars of Eternity or Deadfire or any of these more modern isometric RPGs, because this is in the show, this is our first like quote unquote modern or contemporary isometric RPG. And this is the thing that,
in fact, this came out after Pillars of Eternity.
yeah, in between Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. And I think this is the biggest jump in between them, is that these games, these more contemporary games, are very comfortable with giving you like a backdrop, like a nice image, and then just letting decisions and choices play out without having to stick them into isometric gameplay at every moment.
Yes.
And I think that is on one hand, awesome. I think that is amazing. I think it's letting the storytelling do the walking, as it were. And I think that's good. On the other hand, it makes the parts where you're not doing that, and when you are stuck in the isometric framework for unclear reasons, feel even more weird. Now, I don't know if that doesn't happen to me necessarily that I can remember in Torment, Tides of Numenera, but that was exactly how I felt about Pillars of Eternity, Deadfire.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of have my ear to the ground on that kind of thing.
I will say that I think that I agree with everything you said. There's a real kind of spectrum that will try to be attuned to as we move through this game in terms of what the game's choosing us to do and how we end up choosing, how we end up experiencing certain things. But I do think that it's interesting. It feels like there were hints of this even as early as Baldur's Gate 1. Remember those dreams we had? I don't think in Baldur's Gate 1 there was ever like dialogue choices within the dreams.
No, there weren't.
It was just
continue.
It was just continue.
Yeah, it was like a narration. It
was a narration. But man, it's close, right? It's
Absolutely.
like all it would have taken for Baldur's Gate 1 to get there was just like a few one-off dialogue trees within those dreams about like the wave of blood or like being on that boat aboard a sea of blood and such. So I like it feels, even though it's a real like step forward, it doesn't feel utterly unmoored from the experiences I've had.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it is part of a lineage, and someone realized, like, hey, we can just adapt that. And maybe that's the benefit of doing a show like Mages and Murderdads, right? Is that we can, like, we've been there, bro.
Yes,
we've been in the blood sea. But so yeah, so we do this, and we're falling out of the sky, and we look up, and I like the choices in this kind of, I don't know, pseudo cut. So we'll need to figure out a word for these things. But in this like choose your own adventure section, because like you're able to choose what you want to do, and so I like tried to like beeline toward the ground and like keep control of my body. I don't know what you decided to do.
Yeah, I ignored, and I kind of wish that I had in retrospect. There were several times where I could, instead of attempting to stabilize myself in the air as I fell or examine the ground, there was several options that said try to remember.
Yes.
And I did not ever choose try to remember just because it didn't seem like my most urgent course of action in that moment. As I'm falling, to a ground that's 50 kilometers below. Good to know we're on the metric system in the far future after 8 civilizations have fallen.
You know what? It's useful. Divisible by 10. Very important. Even we can't get that right. So yeah, and somewhere in that, while you're falling, we basically teleport to a mind palace.
Yes.
So like some sort of abstracted pseudo space in our brain. It's basically the pocket plane from Throwing a Ball. Right?
It's the pocket plane. I see my character portrait for the first time. There's some Netrunner stuff going on here, definitely. But yeah, it is very recognizable as being a non-corporeal location.
Yeah, there's all kinds of like, I don't know, little octagons,
everything
hexagons.
is a floating hex. That's the first sign. If you wake up anywhere, like look, if you go on a bender at a bachelor party. Maybe you want to go see Limp Bizkit live, and you get too rowdy, and you wake up and you're surrounded by floating hexagons. I'm just going to tell you, you're not in Kansas anymore. Here, you're in a mind palace.
That's where it is. And in the Mind Palace, you have to do like weird little puzzle things, right? And what I really like about this section of the, like, you know, whatever the intro of the game or whatever it is that it uses pseudo challenges and memories and things like that in this Mind Palace in order to build your character for you.
Yes.
So we kind of get this. I don't know. I can't even think of other games that do this, even though I know that I've experienced this before.
Well, not in this way, not in a narrative way, but you are provided with recommendations, like a recommended character at the end of the little dungeon in Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Yeah, the Elder Scrolls. I think not all of them do this, but
not all
yeah,
of them do this.
That is true. Yeah,
but yeah, it's
that.
at the end of certain like intro dungeons, based on the skills you used and like the kind of experiences you had, they'll make a suggestion. This seems way better than that, just because. I don't know, it's a little bit more narrative, and you can really, in the same way that when you take a personality test, a Myers-Briggs, and you want to be extroverted, you can kind of do that. Whereas in games where you're actually using the actual gameplay and how you interact with things in real time, in an emergent way, sometimes you want to be a sneaky fellow, but you aren't a sneaky fellow, but just because it's harder to be a sneaky fellow, and then the game just says, oh, you're not a sneaky fellow. Whereas this one, you get narrative control over whether you're a sneaky fellow.
We also get introduced to like how the stats work in this game, right?
Yes.
So which I really appreciate. I like this stat flow of this game. I'm assuming that the Numenera-verse or the Numenera rule set, I couldn't come up with a word there, but like the rule set for Numenera, I'm assuming it has to work a similar way. I've never actually looked at the tabletop book for it, but there's just 3 stats, right? There is might, speed, and intellect. And when you go, you have like a pool of those for a given encounter. And you basically are making percentage rolls against a target, and you can expend a certain amount of might, a certain amount of speed, and a certain amount of intellect in that encounter through effort. They call this doing effort or expending effort. And that determines if you win or lose or not. So you could, and this will happen several times over the course of it, or of the game, if there are a bunch of different opportunities for you to expend effort, you can expend a lot of effort early to get 100% rolls on things, or 85% or whatever, high rolls. But that means that later in the event, you're going to have less effort to expend on perhaps different challenges. So it's about deciding where your finite amount of effort can be used or should be used in a given conversation or skill check tree. In an encounter or an event, which
exactly.
I think it's good.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I think I'll walk that back. I think that's very intriguing. I'll need to see it in action before I make a final judgment in terms of outside the tutorial. I do think that the Monty Cook's role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, uses this, and if I recall, it's basically a dice pool system, right? You get a pool of might die, and you can expend them to add to your normal roll, and it kind of accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That would be how you would represent it on the... Because they're like individual pips in the game. So it makes sense for them to be just raw dice in a tabletop setting. Yeah, I mean, it's a system that very quickly begins to show its limitations. But I think that to its benefit, the game is well designed within those limitations. And of course, like we'll talk about this and we'll see it. But I think we're going to have really different kinds of experiences of those things anywhere. or anyway, later in the game. But we'll talk about who our characters are at the end of this dungeon that we're talking through.
Yes.
Because, like, unlike, Irenicus's dungeon in Baldur's Gate 2, which is just, like, a grab bag dungeon that has a narrative and ecological thread to it, like, this is specific, and that is about giving you gear to get your party ready to go out into the world, and it tells a little bit of a story. Mm-hmm. This is just about character building, like, top to bottom.
Yeah. Okay, well, and Irenicus's dungeon also served as kind of a tutorial section for the mechanics of combat. I would also throw that in there.
But never in an explicit way, right?
Never
like
in an
sink or
explicit
swim
way. In a purely kind of just emergent way, and also just introducing you, hey, traps work. Like, there are more traps per square foot in Irenicus's dungeon than a lot of other subsequent areas, just because they're teaching you that they even exist, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, this is purely a narrative crucible through which your character gets spit out.
Absolutely. And so the first one is like an underwater adventure.
Interesting.
Do you remember this one?
Yes. The big takeaway. Yeah, the big takeaway. I was a little confused when I first went up to it because it kept talking about my companion. I was like, wait, where's my companion? But then I was like, oh yeah, I must be in a vision of some kind, a la Planescape, or sometimes you'll experience these types of things in Pillars of Eternity too.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically you're underwater and you have your friend. And are you attempting to hack something?
Unclear. Like,
yeah,
all
you're
of these
unlocking
are very
something. You're trying to
res,
get
right?
access to something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying, and you're like being pursued. And I think that the thing is like your companion has better access to it than you do. And so, like, in my case, I said, because you're trying to get a device of some sort. And so in my case, I said, I lied, and I said, hey, we're being pursued. I need you to hurry up and use that apparatus. And so it convinced my companion to do so, and I was, like, able to get it from them.
Oh, that didn't work out my way.
Mm-hmm. What happened for you?
Yeah, I told my companion to, like, step aside and let me try. But that did not work out, and my companion ended up, like, being incapacitated, basically. It was a sadder ending.
That does. I think in my ending, my companion died too, though.
Oh, okay.
So, and then the second one is that you're standing on a cliffside, and you've got you're with a different companion, and you are building a sanctuary in a cliffside. And,
yeah,
like,
you're constructing a refuge, and there are these basically constructs of some kind that are aiding you.
They're self-aware.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, self-aware robots.
Little Modrons or something.
Something. And yeah, so one starts goofing off or something. So I, like, went down there and I, like, mechanically fixed its head. Because it was being interfered with a big rock, like a magnet or something.
Yeah. I assumed that the because I was able to alleviate my companion's fears about whether or not this was the correct location. I was like, hey, there's all these magical or God, I guess you can't use that word anymore. These God, what's the word they use?
So the word mystical does show up in this game.
Yeah.
I specialized in it, so yeah. I mean, this is maybe a productive moment to say that, like, this game, much like Planescape Torment, is like kind of science fantasy, right? And that, like, there is a move in some instances to say that, like, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and so, like, I guess magic happens sometimes, and there's like parallel universe stuff going on in some cases that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But so, right, there's this indistinguishability between those things. But yeah, I think in that I also chose a similar dialogue option, and I think it's to be like, look, previous civilizations have settled here. Their artifacts are here. So then, therefore, this must be like a site of power.
Yeah, and I basically, at one point, the robot slapped me, and I assumed that there was some kind of field, or the energies of the place were interfering with the robot's normal functioning, and therefore I like basically put a tinfoil hat on the robot so it could function properly.
That's exactly what I did as well. And then the other one is like a fight between two adversaries, and you're trying to protect someone behind you.
They're cool adversaries too.
Yeah, it's basically Ornstein and Smo, right?
Yeah.
Except it's like if Ornstein was had a dagger instead of a halberd.
Yeah, and
basically.
the dagger was invisible.
Yeah, hell yeah, invisible daggers and dash blades and whatnot. And I played that. I chose to like play defensively, so because you can attack or try to bowl them over and run, or play defensive to see how their tactics work. And I was very defensive, so I could keep them from the big hammer smash, to avoid the big hammer smash, and then avoid that invisible knife too.
I was super offensive. I really got in their faces, and I was able to exploit a timing mishap of my large kind of hammery adversary, and the slider adversary I was able to just overpower, and I think I just threw the smaller adversary over the parapet, and just down to the ground, smash.
They were locked into that animation. I couldn't do anything about it.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
that backstab. So after you do all of these, there's like a mirror that you walk up to, and in that mirror, this is very similar to the end of Planescape Torment when we met like the paranoid self, the good self, and the pragmatic self.
That's right.
And so we look into this mirror and we see this plenitude, this massive number of versions of ourselves, and basically, it seems like to me, and tell me if you think this is right or not, but it seemed like to me that I was given a subset of all of those big numbers based on the decisions I'd made already in these different encounters, and then I chose from one of those, and then that helped create my character.
That's the
Is that the sense you got
impression
too?
that I got too, but I want to hear what your two options are, and we'll see if that's actually the case.
My options were... there was one who was sweet talking. There was one who was thieving. And I don't remember. I had 3, and I don't remember what the other one was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I chose the one who was sweet talking, the charismatic one. And he came up to me and he flicked a dagger up into the air and then caught it by the blade and then threw it at me, I believe. He did something kind of offensive, and the way that he was talking to me made me forgive him by the time he actually got up close to me. That was the narrative I got, that he's that charismatic, he's that good, that he made me even forget why I was even a little bit mad at him. And so that's who I chose as my character, and I got the descriptor of Slick.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, I did not get any of those.
Where'd you get?
I only saw 2 figures. I did not see 3.
Oh.
One was skulking around and kind of sneaking around, trying not to be seen, and the other was towering over everyone else, being real loud and pushing people out of the way.
Oh.
And so I chose the larger one because I kind of wanted to be a more imposing figure. And I realize in a lot of ways I may be just recreating Balthazar, but I promise I'm going to try to... I'm not going to do that 100%.
I think people enjoy Balthazar, though. I think the fans love Balthazar, so...
The fans might love Balthazar. Well, okay. Well, I'll walk that back because it might have been a lie. Anyway, and it's interesting because after you choose, they kind of take a step out of the mirror and merge into you, basically.
Yeah. And it kind of gives you some stat stuff.
Yeah, and it says you're now strong.
Oh, well, so that's the descriptor you got, was strong?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So kind of right after this, we basically get the character builder, right? Which is comprised of a class selection, some class skills, and then descriptors. And so we've been given the descriptor, or I was given the descriptor of slick, and you were given the descriptor of strong, but you can change those in this calculus of final character creation. What character class did you choose? Because there's 3.
Yes. Right. So there are, I believe there are glaives, nanos, and jacks.
There's more than that.
There's more than 3?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, by all means, name them. Yeah, those were the 3 that I saw.
Well, tell me about which one you chose, and I'll let you know.
I am a glaive.
And what does that mean?
So that is basically a warrior. They're warriors. Technology adepts are nanos, which are basically kind of mages or sorcerers or what have you. And jacks are a jack of all trades, maybe implied kind of rogue situation. By all means, tell me about more, because those were literally the only 3 I saw.
No, you're right. There's only 3. I don't know why I thought
so certain.
I don't know why I thought there was an additional one that like only shows up sometimes.
It is really interesting because you remember how we had a long conversation when we were brainstorming Adventure World about the history of the rogue in Dungeons and Dragons, right? The idea about, should we have a class whose main thing is just being stealthy, and also, should we have a class whose main thing is just being a little bit good at everything?
Yeah, because for people who don't know, I think we've even talked about this on the show before, but if you didn't listen to that episode, historically, there was no thief class in original D&D. There's no thief class because the idea was that everyone could kind of be like Conan the Barbarian, and Conan the Barbarian is cleaving people's heads off with an axe all day long. You can also sneak, up a tower and climb a rope and stuff like that, right? And so it was a game shop in California that invented the thief class, and it was hotly debated at the time.
So Numenera has already made some really strong choices about in terms of the jack and like what that means.
Absolutely, because it just means you're not a specialist in anything.
Yeah, basically this is a bipolar world, right? There are 2 extremes. There is physical, magical, and then you can be not a specialist in either and kind of be in the middle. And not bipolar in the technical sense. Oh, not in the clinical
sense.
term. No,
but quite literally, just 2 axioms.
Yes.
Of what kind of stuff you can do in the world. So you chose glaive, and I chose nano. So I'm a wizard. Basically.
Oh well, we worked it out then. We are on the 2 opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yep. And so, I chose that, and I'm looking at my stuff right now. So then after you choose your class, you choose your abilities. I think the first time I played this game, I played as a jack. And so I don't even know what your abilities are. What did you choose as a glaive?
Yeah, so I chose the... So this is just like the one ability I chose after I chose strong, and I believe I chose heavy weapon.
Because that's when you put your pips in, right?
Exactly.
But what about your tiered abilities?
Tiered abilities.
Yeah, so it's like taunt, opportunist, hook, unfailing precision, skill with defense.
Oh, critical hit.
Grease. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, those were 2 different options, I guess. So there's like getting an ability and then like...
Yeah, they're kind of like on 2 sides of the screen, right? There's like the pips and then abilities, I guess. I don't know if the names in this game are great. Like as far as like describing what the thing it is you're choosing.
It feels a little generic, doesn't it?
It does. You would think.
Like they kind of just they're all like they're all ice cream flavors that are all vanilla hyphen something.
Vanilla bean.
Yeah.
I chose Innervate, which is basically like a heal spell that also gets rid of fettles. We'll talk about fettles in a minute.
Oh, you mean debuffs or buffs?
No, I mean fettles. They're definitely different. They're definitely not called status effects. It's very weird that in a place where I think a generic term would be very useful, they have used the word fettle. So maybe we won't talk about it in a minute. We'll just talk about it right now. In this game, any status effect, positive or negative, buff, debuff, whatever, is called a fettle. And they all have like a time limit to them. Most of them have a round limit.
Sure.
How long you experience
and they are visually denoted by things like, I don't know, green arrows up, red arrows down, right?
Yep. Sounds like a buff and a debuff. Anyway, it definitely can't be. But anyway, so I chose Innervate because those things I remember those things being hella annoying. So it like gets rid of those and it also heals you. So I got a heal spell and I got Scan Thoughts.
Scan Thoughts.
It is the coolest thing. When you talk to someone in the game, at the end of their dialogue, there will be like orange brackets, and it's a one-sentence line of what they are thinking.
That's great.
It's very cool. And mostly, like, so far in the game, at this point, it's just been like additional information, right? So it gives you a sense of how they feel about what they just said, or about like the understated part of whatever they just said. But it's pretty sweet.
No, that sounds incredibly useful. Yeah. I think I can, like, smash things good. Mm-hmm. And I hit hard.
Well, hope you like fighting. Based on Planescape Torment, that's going to be great, I bet.
We'll see. We're gonna have to find out. Hopefully, a game made in the year of our Lord 2017 has like combat that is serviceable.
Gotta hope. So at this point too, you get to kind of pick a specialization of the stats that you do. So you get to increase your stat pool, basically. What did you just put it all into might?
It's all in might, yeah.
I put all of mine in intellect. So I'm ready to go with my stuff. So I guess the mirror disappears. I actually forget what happens here, but you end up in a separate room in the Mind Palace.
Correct. We can step through the mirror, and we enter kind of the last screen of the Mind Palace.
And there is a character called the Spectre. And the Spectre,
stay a while and listen.
Yeah, basically. And you info dumps everything to you, right?
Yeah.
So we can list off these things. So we are in your own brain. We are truly in a mind palace.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, the Spectre is like a kernel of your personality and your thoughts. So when you talk to the Spectre, you're talking to you.
Yes.
In the same way that in the pocket plane in Baldur's Gate, throwing a ball, when you talk to people in the pocket plane, you're talking to a version of you.
Yes, and you have to salute your Spectre because you're only a lieutenant, and he's a colonel.
Yes, but very important to honor the ranks. Mm-hmm. We don't learn about the changing god yet, right?
No, not yet.
Okay, so the third thing that matters, you're hunted by the sorrow.
Yeah, basically, have you ever seen The Never-Ending Story?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Artax.
the nothing.
The nothing. Or it's just the transcendent one from Planescape Torment.
Yeah, that might also be a thing.
So in the way that Planescape Torment slow-rolled the revelation of the transcendent one, of even being an entity in that game for 2/3 of it, right? We didn't really know about the transcendent one. In the first 15 minutes of Torment Tides of Numenera, we know that we're being hunted by a big old entity. We know that it's murderous and we gotta kill it, and then it appears in our own brain.
Yeah, it's classic big bad in the first 15, right?
Yeah.
Because I would love for the villain of this game to be just a person. Mm-hmm. Right? But I just don't know if that's gonna pan out.
We'll see. We're not going to spoil anything for you. Could be just a person. Could be a dude named Tom.
Just the owner of the inn. Just having
the ultimate village. He just needs those gold pieces.
Just needs the gold pieces, and the Sorrow is still doing bad stuff, but neither of you care about the Sorrow. You have more more concrete concerns in the world, which are your little pieces of gold.
So as you're having this conversation with the Spectre, the Sorrow literally like whips ass right out of a teleporter in the middle of the screen, right? And there are all these different fragments of your mind who are like walking around just having a good old time, kind of like in the dream sequences of Baldur's Gate, and it like shoots these tendrils out and it sticks into them, and the game is like, hey, it's time for the combat tutorial.
Yeah.
This game is not pause and play like the other games we've played.
Correct. It is pure turn-based.
Yeah, so the game...
A la Temple of Elemental Evil. Right?
I believe you. I can't remember.
Okay.
That game must be turn-based, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so, so they just like... It's like, hey, I forget what they call it. It's called like a conflict or something like that. I don't remember the term for it, but it kind of fades in the screen.
A crisis.
A crisis, yeah. And so you get a move action, and you get an attack, and an item use, right? Isn't that the case, I believe?
Yeah, I think at the tutorial, that's correct.
And so, it just kind of has you moving around, and what you have to do is you have to slay these like specters in your mind in order to unroot the sorrow from your subconscious. And the whole time you're doing this, every turn, it poops out these squid-looking things that like shoot off into your brain somewhere. They like fly off the screen.
And the Spectre even says, "Oh shit, those are just going to be around in your brain now."
Yeah, he's pretty open about how bad that is. And so you do it, and you knock it out, and it like sucks back into its little wormhole, and you wake up.
Not until you overcome a fiddly fickle.
The what now?
Oh gosh, what do you call them? Hold on, I gotta scroll up to remind myself what this is called.
The fiddly fickle?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
The feckle.
What you're talking A fiddle?
A feddle, there we go. God, I was so close. Like 3 different ways. Yeah, one of them gets a fickle on them.
Oh, correct. So this is our kind of introduction how they work. So we currently only have an unarmed attack, and it gets a fettle that increases its damage reduction by 10.
I'm never going to call that a fettle. I'm sorry. I'm never going to be able to remember.
You got to stick hard line. So then you have to like pick up a piece of shattered glass. You got to throw it at this person. And the fettle doesn't block glass damage. And it takes one in the brain, and then the sorrow flips away. And so that's our introduction both to the combat and the fettle. Serviceable combat so far, you think?
There's no way to know. I've gone and I've like struck 3 tentacles that did not fight back, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
True.
So I know what combat is in terms of I need to hit buttons, and it is like shown me how those button presses work. To call it a combat tutorial is a little, I don't know.
I see. You need a dungeon. You need Irenicus' dungeon.
I need something that would fight back, and then I would say, okay, I know what combat is.
The Spectre also tells us as we're leaving, like as we're flying out the door of our own subconscious, of our mind palace, he says, listen, easy peasy to kill the sorrow. Don't worry about it. Just use the resonance chamber, and everything's going to be A-okay, totally cool. Just go use the resonance chamber. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And then we wake up. Where do we wake up?
We wake up next to our giant broken resonance chamber.
Because we fell from the sky at Mach 10, barreling toward the earth, and smashed right into the resonance chamber.
Yes.
on our way in. So we broke it apart with our very brain. Which
is a real nod to Planescape Torment's beginning, right? This is the first real narrative consonants that I've seen.
100%, because the pitch in that game is that, the end of the game is in the same room as the beginning of the game.
Yes, but I was even referring to what is the number one thing that you are told, hey, You just make sure to protect your journal. And
Yes.
at the very beginning, it is revealed, oh, shit, it's gone.
Lost that journal. Mm-hmm. Don't trust the skull. But we're woken up by two people, by two NPCs. A guy named Allegern, whose body is covered in, like, roiling snake tattoos. And a woman named Callistiga. Mm-hmm. Who is, like, surrounded and superimposed by, like, echoes of herself. Like,
Pretty
visual
cool
echoes.
stuff.
Yeah. It is pretty cool stuff. What are they all about?
Well, one's cool and one's kind of a drag. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
But basically, they give us a little bit of... They're our first kind of lore into the real game and not just in our Mind Palace nonsense. Mm-hmm. And our big takeaway is that they're kind of like two groups we can seek out in order to aid us moving forward, right? One is a cult of the changing god, and the other is the Order of Truth. And like, I get these names after I say, hey, I really need to fix this thing over here that I just
this
broke
resonant chamber that I smashed with my body.
with my actual face that like God
gotta
knows
fix this
how
bad
many
boy.
kilometers per hour, because that's what we're using here.
Yep.
And I don't need to hear too much about these groups to know that the cult of the changing god is what I'm after.
Yes. Who's the changing god?
Apparently, I am a part of the cult, the changing god. Like, I came from the changing god's like realm of some kind. We are interrelated, and at least that's what Alern believes.
So, yeah, the changing god is super cool to me, like, conceptually, and I think it solves a lot of problems in Planescape Torment. The problem with Planescape Torment being, like, you did everything, right? That every major thing in the world that happens is because of you.
Yeah.
The changing god, conceptually, is like one person, right? Like, it's one intelligence that creates new bodies for itself, and then just transports its consciousness into those new bodies, right?
Yeah.
And so when you transport your previous body, like, consciousness blooms within that body and it becomes its own person. And those people are cast-offs. So we are technically a body, of the changing god.
Which makes a whole bunch of sense in terms of how some of the tutorial stuff is worded, where you talk about, like, with the underwater mission, you're like, oh, this body is obviously used to holding its breath for a long time. It was everything was kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, and so it solves the problem of, like, the changing god has done all kinds of, like, weird, world-altering mad scientist stuff, right? But you didn't do it. And sometimes it might have been your body. I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff come up in this game, but it allows for you to be, like, culpable for stuff in the world or connected to things in the world without it literally being you and you just not remembering, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, so we're
it'll be really interesting to see how that pays off.
It's pretty cool. Some of it's pretty cool. I will say that I think it's good. So on one hand, there's like a cult that worships this figure, the changing god, and the other there's a bunch of cops called the Order of Truth.
Yeah.
Right. Allegern and Callistiga are like treasure hunters, which is how they're here, where they found you, me, the character, and they join into the party, and they're like, yeah, look, we'll help you find one of these, these two groups. And they're pretty chatty. I like that in this game, your party member will be like, hey, I want to talk to you. Excuse me. I would like to speak to you now.
Dang.
To move the plot forward. And so I had, like, conversations with Allegern about that, and stuff like that. And our kind of only real encounter, right, that we have in this episode is that we meet a guy and his, like, cronies, and his name is Cora. Do you remember what he was all about?
we know that he's looking for us because he is looking for a falling star, like a shooting star, basically. Yeah. I did not lie to Koro. But I don't think I told the truth either. I think it was like a lying by omission, perhaps.
What'd you say?
I think I said, I think it may have landed over there.
Yeah. So you didn't own up, and you weren't like, hey, I fell out of the sky?
No, I don't think I did that. That didn't seem super prudent.
Yeah, I didn't do that either. So yeah. And then, this is kind of the last thing that we did for the episode, but then the game, it adds some, like, artificial drama. Wouldn't you say that this is, like, artificial drama?
Yeah, so explain.
So Allegorn says, isn't it convenient that Koro, a former friend of Callistiga, isn't it convenient that he showed up to, like, try to steal our treasures or something? And she's like, what are you talking about, Allegorn? And he was like, you are traitorous and you're two-faced and you're bad. And she's like, Allegorn, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. That doesn't make any sense. And the game then presents you with a choice. It says you can go with Callistiga or you can go with Allegorn.
Oh my god. So yeah, this is why I don't remember the Koro thing. I may have reloaded. I had this conversation and I chose before I even left and before I met Koro.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I just immediately chose Allegorn because he's down with the Cult of the Changing God, and it seems like that's a more fruitful path, given that I am that stuff.
I chose Callistiga.
Why'd you do that?
She seems cool. Snake tattoos, whatever. That's some Marvel Universe shit. Human being with a bunch of echoes of themselves floating around,
You can't trust a human being with a bunch of echoes floating around themselves.
I don't need to trust them. I just have to think they're interesting. So I went with Callistiga. You went with Allegorn. That's produced a good, helpful bifurcation in our gameplay, I think.
It is interesting, though, because I don't know. When I first said what character I was going to make, I don't know if I've necessarily made that character, but we've still made opposite choices.
What we have.
Which just speaks to us as people, ultimately.
Yeah, I'm a wise wizard, and you're a headstrong warrior man.
I guess.
Well, so next time we'll do these different missions, and we'll be able to talk about all those different things.
And hopefully we'll have like a better idea, or at least I will. Kunzman already has, but we'll have a better idea of the mechanics and be able to talk a little bit more about like how combat actually works and how kind of the nuts and bolts of this game feels when it's hurtling down its path.
Yeah, and some people, like I think that I will probably have many fewer combat encounters than you will.
Yes.
So that'll change the game quite a bit. Okay. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/rangedtouch. You can support us on Patreon by looking down in the description below. You should hit the subscribe button, and you should hit that little bell to find out every time that we release a video. We have a new video out every 2 weeks. There's another range.
With all the things you list, it's like people already have a job. Like what you've just described, that's going to take 8 hours.
Let me tell you, it takes me just as long to say it all. We got 2 T-shirts coming out. They're not going to be out by the time this episode is out, but
this is the first announcement, right?
I know that we've said we will have T-shirts, but those are set in stone, and the art is done, and those T-shirts will be appearing within the next couple weeks. It'll be before episode 2 of Torment, Danni and CMRN for sure. So keep an eye on our social media for that. You can go and join our Discord if you want to know about that immediately. We'll be posting about it all the time.
Can I just say that both T-shirts are so good, it's hard for me to pick a favorite.
Yeah, so there's going to be 3. We're not going to say what they are. You should wait with bated breath, but there's going to be the T-shirt 1, which is a Balthazar. I think we can say as a Balthazar-oriented T-shirt. There is a t-shirt 2, which is a Dark Souls oriented t-shirt more generally. And then there will be like a plain Range Touch logo shirt if you're just into brands. If you just love brands, for example.
If you're like, man, you wake up, you're thinking it's Saturday. I don't have to wear my work clothes. What do I want to do? I want to rep something and not get paid for advertising. That's what I'm about.
I want to spend money to advertise someone else.
Yes.
You'll be able to do it. We're also going to put, it'll be the logo and then both of our Twitters in 200-point font and then the website. Just all the way across your chest, all the way down.
And actually, this is it might be a little bit of a spoiler. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but if you wear the shirt for 2 hours and you take it off, it actually temporary tattoos all of the aforementioned on your bare skin.
Yeah, very, very good for summer wear. That's why we're making sure to get it out just in time for it to get cold at the end of summer. But yeah, so those t-shirts will be coming out soon. Keep an eye out for those. They will be as moderately priced as we can make them. Our intent with these are not to make money because commissioning art's expensive.
It's correct.
And we believe in, having good relationships with artists. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You can listen to Game Study Buddies as well. It's my other show with Michael Lutz that's hosted here on the Range Touch Network. You can find that at rangetouch.com. Anything else you can think of? You going to start streaming again soon?
Yeah, I should have my computer back very soon, and then we'll get right back to McDonald's Treasureland Adventures.
Like you never left.
Like I never left.
They shaved a second off that speedrun.
I know. It's the tech every day. When is Kotaku going to write an article about that?
All right, next episode going to be Torment, Tides of Numenera, episode 2. I don't know how much further. I don't know how many episodes this is going to be, but probably like 10. I would say it's probably going to be about the same as Planescape Torment. So if you want to play along, you can probably play through the next little bit of the game. Kind of the next major stopping point, I think, for the thing. And then we'll see you in 2 weeks. Also remember, too, you can check down the description below if you would like to subscribe to this on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Those are both viable options. In case you want to listen to this as a podcast rather than as a video. If you already do that, then great.
All right, well, ciao.
In the year of the spirit, a great host will come from the east like a plague of locusts. So saith the wise Alondo. When the shadows descend upon the lands, our divine Lord will walk alongside us as he walks. So saith the great Alondo.